Hey Deepak, thanks for taking me through the BoxyHQ SaaS application.
Thanks, Kalk. Thanks, everyone. Super excited to give you a walkthrough of um, our SaaS application that will help you plug in security building blocks into your product, make it more compliant, secure. Today, we'll kind of demonstrate how to sign up for an account and then create an SSO connection, an enterprise SSO connection that you can then use in your super cool SaaS application so that you can onboard your enterprise users just within a few minutes, right? You don't have to spend days or weeks on this. I'll show you how easy it is to do that. All you need to do is head over to our SaaS app. It's app.eu.boxyhq.com. We have a free trial, 30-day trial. There's no need to enter any card information either. We're happy to extend that as well as you need for your to set up your project. So I'm going to go click through create a new trial account. Just enter your name, of course. So we're obviously big Pulp Fiction fans. So we'll create one for Samuel Jackson. Call it Pulp Fiction. Team is how we organize and group accounts within the SaaS app. You can create multiple teams. Typically you'd need one team, but you're free to create more. And then what happens is, as we lead through it, you will create products within each team. So specifically, one that maps directly to how many of our products you're looking to integrate SSO with. You can have as many as you like. Give it a name, an email. Okay. Go through with that. We've got a captcha check, of course. Create the account. What will happen underneath is a team slug gets created. You can change that later on, of course. You need to go ahead and verify your email address. We'll just do that in the background now. I've done that. Let me just now go in and log in. So if I jump back, I'll sign in with created account. Perfect. So now we're in. You see that the team is Pulp Fiction. We've got one member there. We'll just go through that. You can change the team slug here, of course. We can see that Samuel Jackson is now the owner here. Of course, there's a billing tab for later on. And you can generate an API key here for use with our own APIs. We'll demonstrate that in a different video. So everything now starts with a product. So that's how we group your applications effectively. So we'll go ahead and create a new product. Let's say you're building, let's give it a good name. Skulk, any good suggestions for a product? Um, Maybe on the
Uh,
Pulp Fiction theme.
yeah, now I'm drawing a complete blank here.
We'll
Uh,
do Wolf, right? Mr. Wolf.
yes, there we go.
Let's do that for him. Maybe you need to do a bit of cleanup. Um, so what happens when you create a product is you get a product ID. You need that later on to integrate with our OAuth 2.0 authorization flow. You also get um, you know um, um, so that's effectively the ID that identifies your product, and then within that you would create tenants. So it's multi-tenanted in that sense, which supports your SaaS application. And the product ID and the tenant, which is what you need to complete the enterprise SSO flow for your customers. The API URL is api.eu.boxyhq.com. We've got a Swagger Hub URL where you can see all the open API spec. We'll dive into that a little later. Today, we'll create all these connections on our interface, but in the future, you can use our APIs to integrate that directly within your SaaS application. We also have some very cool React UI components that you can drop in as replacements there. So yeah, and then you can create your API key here. So first thing we start off with is an enterprise SSO connection. For those who are not familiar with how the SSO flow works, you would head over to your customer effectively would head over to their identity provider. You need to provide them some SP metadata information that's accessible here in this little button here. You click through, it opens up. Let me just go ahead and show that as well. So this is the URL you would share with your customer. And that basically contains the ACS URL or the single sign-on URL. That's where the SAML request would eventually end up with us. We then validate everything and pass that on to you. The entity ID, that's just a unique identifier to identify us because we are acting as a service provider on your behalf. And then the various attributes that they'd set. So with this information, your customer would then go on and create, an Okta application or an Entra ID application or any, SAML 2.0 compliant identity provider they use. We of course also support OpenID Connect. So once that is done, you will end up with an XML metadata file or a URL, which is then configured when you create a connection here. So in this connection, you're just letting us know, as I mentioned earlier, the tenant is the most important thing here. That's your own identification of your customer. Typically, domains are used for this. That's a good way to kind of segment them. You might give them a slug URL. That's entirely kind of up to you. It could be an opaque database ID that you use for that specific organization or team or workspace, or however you're logically grouping your customers on your system. So I'll go ahead and create one. Let me just call it Okta demo. So I'll call this, let's see here. Let's say it's being done for the Acme Corp. And then you need to let us know which redirect URLs to allow here. That's basically to bring you back to your own SaaS application, at which point that's the last part of the OAuth 2.0 flow where you now get a code from us and that code gets exchanged for a user profile. So in this case, we use our demo application. We'll just enter that here. The default redirect URL is specifically for the IDP initiated SAML login flow. So the way SAML works is you are the SP or service provider. You've got the IDP, which is the identity provider. That's Okta in this case. If your login starts for your customer from your own website or web application, then comes to us, we take them to Okta, sign them in, and bring them back. That's called the SP initiated flow. So it's starting from your side, service provider. And what these identity providers also allow you to do is you can start the login directly from a dashboard within the identity provider. So it gets initiated from Okta side. So Okta gives you a nice dashboard where you can assign users various applications. They go to their dashboard, click on one, and then come directly through. Same flow, but it's kind of half the flow because it starts from Okta. So in order to enable that, you would then set a default redirect URL here. So that's typically this with some URL, of course, because this is a very specific URL. So let's say something like that. And that's the destination where we call you back with that same code. In this case, it's not a full OAuth 2.0 flow because there's no state information because it didn't initiate from you. But what you would typically then do is exchange that code using our API for profile information. You don't have to support IDP initiated login flow, but it's quite popular, so that's something to think about. In the meantime, you can just enter any kind of default redirect URL here for now as a placeholder. And the last part here is to let us know what that we spoke about, that SAML application getting created. Once that is done, you get an XML file which contains the metadata we need. We need to know what the entity ID on Okta is. We need to know the certificate to use for that specific SAML application. All of that information is contained within that metadata file. It's either provided as a URL or it typically will let you download an XML file. So I'll quickly pull up our example here. So we've created a Okta application. That's what the metadata URL typically looks like. That's your Okta entity ID, very unique one to identify you. I can also very quickly show you what the metadata file itself looks like. It's from our test account, so there's nothing sensitive here. So that's what a typical XML metadata file coming from the identity provider looks like. As you can see here, it's the IDP SSO descriptor. This is exactly what we need. It contains a bunch of metadata around our authentication requests necessarily signed from our side. Then there's the signing key, which we use to verify that eventually the SAML response, once you log in on Okta side, is authenticated against this certificate. So we know it's coming from Okta as originally advertised. And then this is where we actually take your customers to their Okta instance. That's where they will get logged in. This is, of course, the logout URL, but this is the login URL, the single sign-on login URL. So we read all this, we construct what we call on our side a connection using this. So if we now jump back to finish the last part of this, I've entered all of this. Sort order is an internal feature here. What typically happens is if you can have multiple identity providers against the same tenant, so to speak. This use case might be, you have a very large enterprise that is a group of companies, and they're probably on segmented identity providers. They might be on Okta for one group, Entra ID for another, and maybe a bespoke SAML 2.0 provider for a third group. But you can allow all of them to kind of come to the same account on your side. And what typically happens is we'll display an IDP selection screen at that point if we see more than one. And that's where the sort order is used to kind of define which one you'd like to display first in that list. Force authentication, SAML protocol provides a way where you can say, typically if you're already logged into Okta and you go through this flow, Okta will automatically log you in again. It doesn't show you the login screen if you already have a session for it. If you wanted to change that behavior and force them to log in every time they wanted to come to your application, that's possible. Your customers, IT team will typically decide what kind of security level they want there. So if we do this, then the user is kind of forced to log in every single time into Okta, even though they may already be logged into Okta. So just an added security measure that some enterprises like. I'll go ahead, save this connection, and that's really it, right? For this tenant, this connection has now been set up. And what typically now happens is you will configure OAuth 2.0 on your web application. Speak to us. We then know based on the product ID that I previously mentioned and the tenant here, acme.com. And we know where to take your users to log them in and bring them back to your web application. So as simple as that. Obviously, we have all the APIs for you to do this directly from your own um, SaaS application. But typically, this is where you would start to either test or even onboard your first few enterprise customers this way and get them up and running. So that's really all there is to setting up the connection. Once this is done, you're ready to go. Everything I just showed you now is something you would do on behalf of your customer using our SaaS application. But we have this very cool feature called Setup Links where you can create a unique setup link for your customer, send them a link, and everything we ran through here kind of appears in that interface for them. So I'll quickly show you how this works. So let's say this is for Acme Corp. We'll use the same acme.com here. As we went through this earlier, you've got the allowed redirect URLs for the SP flow, and then the default redirect URL for the IDP flow. We'll just do the same here. You can set an expiry for the setup link. Default is 3 days, but you can feel free to extend that. We know how some enterprises are slow to respond, so you can cater to that. Create a setup link. You now end up with a unique URL that you can copy over. And I'm just going to quickly show you where that URL leads. So you would share that URL with your customer. So now they can effectively self-provision the connection instead of you doing it for them. Here, because the tenant is acme.com, you see that we've already set up a connection here. They will see that. They can edit and modify that if something's wrong there, or they can create a new connection. And what we also do is help them through that initial setup of the SAML application. So if I pick let's say Azure now, it shows them where they need to go, how they create the SAML application. So step-by-step guide. So all of that, as you can see, is nicely covered here. So it's a really easy, well-guided setup to onboard them. Again, we show them all the attributes they need to map here. And then the last step really is just once they've created that application is paste that XML file or the metadata URL here. So super easy, helps you kind of ease that self-provisioning. Again, helps you delay that integration into your web application. You can get them up and running with just a setup link. Again, you can use APIs to create this setup link, so we make it super easy.
That's incredible. Yeah, this is a great walkthrough.
Yeah, because with setup links, we've seen that the biggest hurdle is once you've integrated, of course, is onboarding your enterprise customer. So with that step-by-step guide, it eases that whole process. And a lot of times, avoids those calls that you have to make and jump on board and help them kind of navigate that. They're quite used to it as well. So, but there's always ways to ease this for them.
For sure. Yeah, this is great. Thanks so much, Deepak. I think this is going to be incredibly useful to a lot of people who want to try this out.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Skulk. And we have more of these series coming out. We'll deep dive into how the integration actually happens on your web application using this connection we've set up. We'll also, of course, guide you through directory sync and the identity federation features in future videos.